Hi, hello, welcome to Spell Day. We're covering a spell every single day of the year from the 5e +3. Those +3 spells are homebrew spells. We're at +1 at the moment. You can back the playlist to find it. And today's spell is Legend Lore.
Droge koristite?
Droge? Ne, ja se ne drogiram, folklor je moja droga.
5th level divination, casting time of 10 minutes, range of self, components verbal somatic material, incense worth at least 250 gold pieces, which the spell consumes, and 4 ivory strips worth at least 50 gold pieces each. Duration, instantaneous. Name or describe a person, place, or object. The spell brings to your mind a brief summary of the significant lore about the thing you named. The lore might consist of current tales, forgotten stories, or even secret lore that has never been widely known. If the thing you named isn't of legendary importance, you gain no information. The more information you already have about the thing, the more precise and detailed the information you receive is. The information you learn is accurate, but might be couched in figurative language. For example, if you have a mysterious magic axe on hand, the spell might yield this information. Woe to the evildoer whose hand touches the axe, for even the haft slices the hand of the evil ones. Only a true child of stone, lover and beloved of Moradin, may awaken the true powers of the axe, and only with the sacred word Rudnog on the lips. That was a pretty thorough example. How to go about this one, Legend Lore. It's been used a few times in games I've run, and I've seen people argue on homebrewing the material components because of the wide variety of information you can get, and the quality of the information you get is not determined. It'd be great, it can even be something secret, but there is no specific stat, or specific wording, or specific phrase to set up on what you receive. There's something that came up is I thought you had to do this on an item that you had to touch. I don't know why. I guess I thought it only worked on items, but the fact it also works for places, objects, and persons, and they don't have to be in range, just have to know of them. There's also the thing of how well do you know them? Does that also determine the information? I'm guessing it does. But okay, let's say the secret information that just isn't commonly known is the highest tier of information you can get. And then on the low end is just finally knowing some basic information of the public knowledge. So depending on how much you know in this list, like let's say you get to about here, then if you cast the spell, you get the secret knowledge, or the stuff few people know. Whereas if you're starting here, you just get some of the general knowledge. That's at least how I assume it works, because again, it doesn't say anything in specific outside of your previous knowledge determines what you'll get. Now, does that just mean you won't get repeats, so it could be anywhere on that scale we just mentioned? I mean, it says the more precise and detailed the answer you receive, depending on the more you know about it, so likely it works on the scale. This could also theoretically go through planes. It doesn't have a limit on the objects or the people in question, though it kind of does, on whether it's of legendary importance or not. Now we have to ask, what's of legendary importance? Sure, if you're basing it off magic items and artifacts, it's legendary or unique. Up to that point, you just go up that scale. But when it comes to the terrain, places, locations, and people, how do you determine that? So depending on how you figure that out on importance, because let's say there's a local village that has a local hero or some folk hero, and you actually want to know how to narrow it down or whether it's true or not. Even though it's specific to that village and is of legend around the village, does it not work because it's only related to that village? Or what do you talk about creatures and things that are specifically within certain cultures? Okay, alright. Legend lore, and the fact you can just idly target it, this has me thinking of someone going through a library or talking to some folklore person or someone who remembers it in a village, hearing a local bard play a song about it, and just that idle knowledge or story that's carried through different cultures or isolated to specific cultures. If you cast it there, does it not work because it's only for that one specific group of people? Or is it specifically on a scale? Like, yeah, the one village example doesn't work, but if it's a whole country that follows this figure or knows of this story, then yes, that counts as legendary. Or does it have to be on a global scale? How is the magic determining this in the first place? My theory, at least, of how it is determining this is also wrapped up in the theory that magic itself is entwined with fate. So someone mentioned this in the comments a while back on the imprisonment video, but the idea that certain features of spells or items inevitably have fate turned back towards them in some way. So I go along with the side of kind of fate binds it, and just because that's as loose as possible as you need it, but also falls within narrative lines. Because in the end, with a lot of spells, it goes down to the GM. But the actual worth of the spell, despite what it can actually possibly target not being clear, is the information might also not be clear. Not in the sense that it's specific or not, But the fact that it can be so vaguely worded, like, you could probably put together what the axe does, but why would you need that information on the axe? Like, oh, if you have evil alignment and you touch this axe, it's gonna hurt you. Okay? Was the because we don't know the question to that example. Was that someone just tell me something that not many people know about the axe, like one of the secrets, and then it tells you that? Just out of the blue? Is that too useful? Were you trying to find its location? Does it not provide any of the information you were actually seeking, but just a random lottery out of a wiki on it, essentially? And all of these questions, and all of these things that come to mind, and like whether it's worth it or not, are so hampered by the spell level, which at certain points in the game, a wizard will be able to get back on a short rest, certain points. But 5th level spell slot's already pretty hefty, 10-minute casting time, gonna be cast out of combat, makes sense, most likely gonna be in that situation anyway. The issue, and where most people homebrew this spell away, is in its material components for what it gives you. 250 gold pieces worth of incense that are consumed by the spell each time it's cast. Ouch! This spell isn't even a ritual. Ouch! That's also taking the spell slot and the time of day, like, oh man. Then you mix together the fact of the 50 gold piece ivory strip. Or I mean strips, 4 of them, each 50. However, these ones aren't consumed, which is nice. But in total, that brings your cost to an initial 200 gold buy-in, and then on top of that, every time you want to use it, an additional 250 every time you cast the spell. Because it's consumed, because it's a gold component, no focus is actually going to cover it, and I think it's there for similar not dumb, but for a similar reason that Find the Path is the way it is. It's because if you could easily cast the spell all the time, then there wouldn't be many secrets. Because you'd just be able to get... that's also why it's probably not specific, is it's literally allowing it in the GM's hands on how easily you want the plot to move along information-wise in the hands of the players. It's a mix of the bias of Contact Other Plane and the potential madness in that front, and then also the horrid exchange rate for Find the Path. As much as I just brought up, world-building wise though, this would still come up. The ivory strips you can do some fun things with, by the way. You can either have carvings into them or ink placed on them and have them as various bits of decoration on a caster when they're about to cast this, or in some kind of altar where they're casting the spell. I need to do that video. I've had one in the idea of component fashion or architecture. Another video. Incense, however, that's either some really quality incense or just a lot of incense. Bang, the financial cost and the ability to have a spellcaster that can actually cast this. They can be just below 10th level to be able to cast 5th level spells. Around that ballpark. Depending on your setting, this might... I know, for me, average caster-wise, a skilled caster can get up to this point. 5th level spells, and they're like really well in their field. The crazy ones can get higher than 5th. Those are the few. But even though it might be vague, even though it's not in specific and it's based off the information you already know, you'd want it to get as accurate as possible. So let's say you have a divinationist, or court has a divinationist, either publicly elected or king's court, you know, whatever it needs to be. It's an institution. That group is willing to get the funds together, or has the resources to get the funds together, and whatever question they want answered, likely on an object, person, or thing, and again of legendary importance, which, I mean, if it's of such a great use for them, means it can't be some average criminal schmuck, but maybe the name of a famous general that's being fought somewhere else. What's the weakness of them? This is where you learn of Achilles' heel. The issue is, you need to narrow it down as much as possible. So, on top of the resources to actually cast the spell in the first place, there's resources for various scribes, visiting scholars, all the books you can get, and any information on the subject, false or true. And feed it to that divinationist. Feed it to whoever is casting this spell. And then, when they're studied up on the subject that you want them to determine and find a very specific information about, you can then cast this ritual and are likely to get the answer you seek. But then also in the weird prophetic wording, similar to the example given. But that's how this would be implemented into your general population or into the world building. Because other divination spells are cheaper. Maybe equal level, but like let's take Contact Other Plane for an example. You can ask 5 questions. They are biased. So the way you solve that is by having a lot of people be able to cast that. Now you run into the issues of how many spellcasters you have that can cast it, how many spellcasters actually know that spell, and how many spellcasters you're willing to potentially lose to madness. Especially if you are to take into account the likelihood that too many uses of that kind of madness are likely to permanently mentally scar or even feasibly kill those divinationists. I know in my setting I have something that, depending on what you contact, if you roll the madness chart and you've already failed a few times under this creature, you're likely either suffer from demonic possession or some kind of corrupting influence based on the creature, or just death. So it's a bit risky to cast something like that, especially in a large crowd. But if you're desperate enough or don't care for your casters enough, burn them away. Then you have things like Wheel or Woe based off some of the other spells like Augury and such, but there's not many things where you can get so specific information. So it leaves the ruling super vague, so it's up into the GM's hands. And then if you want to do world building wise, do the situation where we said with the institutional person coming in, having the heavily studied on the person they're trying to target, and then the actual investment and resources behind them from this patron to then cast the spell. That might have been a bit long-winded, but this spell has impact on a setting, just for how specific you can get and not having the madness complication. And it's expensive, and that's the reason for it, is because it can be so specific. And it can be used this way. It can tell you the Achilles heel, or the Trojan horse, what's actually in it. It can tell you how to defeat a specific god feasibly, namely an item or relic related to it, and whether that's true or not. Again, things of legendary importance. Specifically as well, importance. It doesn't say status. It says importance. How vital is this to the current moment of the setting or the place you're at? Again, a relic to stop an undead horde. That is now of legendary importance to stopping that. Does that count as legendary again? And we're back in the circle of vague wording. So now I ask you, I've already told you the situation of how I run this and how I'd recommend running this in settings and what role this would take place within NPCs and how to specifically potentially rule it when it comes to players. So tell me what you do in your games, or what's come up in your games, or whether you use the spell or not, or are you one of the groups that homebrew the fact that it's not consumed, or it's actually just a cheaper cost? Mention it below. 6 out of 10. Because when you do it right, it could be really, really good. It can get you that specific answer you need. Especially for 5th level, compared to other divination spells, or Contact Other Plane, which can have its biases, its faults, and its madness. This doesn't have that. It's the vague word. There are so many different potentials as to how well and prepped the character is, that either it can give you the golden goose of what you're trying to find, or some vague prophecy on top of the pile of other vague prophecies that you had already read through to get to this point. And then the resource cost, and both in the research and prep and needing the information, and then also the actual physical gold cost. But it can do so many things, and this would definitely be used in a setting. 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10.